All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of the Practice Room podcast. As you can tell by my attire, St. Patrick's Day edition.
I forgot to wear green.
Oh man. I bet they pinched you at work.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Oh man, all those little kids. Hey, so my name is Cody Thurber. I'm your host of the Practice Room podcast, and I'm joined today by Dr. Samuel Stokes. Dr. Stokes, thanks for being on the Practice Room.
Sure thing.
Awesome. So, give our listeners a little introduction to yourself, like where you fit in the music world.
Okay, well, I'm first of all a music teacher, so I teach in the Talented Music program in Louisiana, and that involves usually teaching people in individual lessons. Mostly I teach piano and percussion, but sometimes I teach other things. Voice I've taught several times, and guitar and bass guitar, and just recently started teaching a few violin students as well. So that's the main thing I do. I'm also an adjunct at NSU, Northwestern State University of Louisiana, where I teach music composition and also the arranging classes whenever anybody wants to take those. I'm also a church musician, so I direct the music at Trinity Episcopal Church, and then I compose and arrange music as well.
Okay, so about how long would you say you've been in each of those roles?
Well, let's see. I've been doing my job in the talent music program for the public school district since 2013, so almost done with my 11th year, I think, if I'm counting correctly. And let's see. And I started soon after that as an adjunct at the university. I think it was the second semester I was here, so I believe it was January 2014 that I began with that. Composing, arranging, I've been doing a lot longer than that. I actually started in high school, and I got paid, I think, to do some little arranging project in high school. I did a lot of stuff that was just for free, but and when I got into college, once my professors knew that I was pretty good at using Finale software and good at transcribing things, I ended up doing a lot of transposition projects, but I was mostly doing my own composing. But I started, I had a website up, from the early days of college where people could contact me and have me arrange stuff. So I did start to pick up a little work, and then, like I said, professors would start sending me work. So they had their own things for me to do, and then they would also, spread the word out and bring me other customers as well. So I've been doing that, I guess, since, technically since high school, I guess, like I said, but definitely in 1998 when I started college, I pretty much immediately started doing some transcribing work, and then that turned into arranging and eventually actually getting paid to compose things every once in a while. So
it's very cool, very cool. So how did you first get your start in music as a child?
Well, very early on, just learning to sing in church. We had, I went to the Church of Christ where it was all a cappella singing, and so we actually had shape note hymnals, which not a lot of people really are all that familiar with, but in Church of Christ, that's what we have. And so you could actually learn the solfege syllables based on what the shapes of the notes were. If you were paying close enough attention, you could figure that out. But, we had a pretty good music program in my elementary school to get started with. And then when I was I think I was 8, I was either 8 or 9 when I started piano lessons. And that was because a friend of mine could play really well by ear, and that was just so fascinating to me. It's like I just had to get lessons. And fortunately, my parents are very supportive of that, and they got me piano lessons. They bought a piano first of all, and then they got me piano lessons because we didn't have one in the house. And then in 6th grade, I started in the band playing percussion, and so I had a lot of opportunities growing up to be involved in music. And then in high school, I did everything I could do, everything I could possibly get my hands on. So I was playing percussion in the band, I was playing piano and percussion in the jazz band, and I sang in the choir for a year and a half like my last year and a half there. I got in the choir, and then I also played the cello in the orchestra my senior year, and I was just an absolute beginner at that. I just wanted to learn more about more instruments so I could be a better composer, and so I just decided to, since I had the time in my schedule, that I just basically my senior year was almost all music, and then I had a couple of classes I had to take to graduate, and the rest was music.
Oh man, that sounds like a dream schedule for senior year.
It was fun.
Yeah. So, what made you draw to percussion? Because it seems like that became your passion pretty early on.
It had a lot to do with Ringo of the Beatles. Because I grew up. We watched a lot of old Beatles movies and the Beatles cartoons, from the '60s and everything. And so he was kind of an inspiration, and saw other drummers as well, like Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. So I really, I got to where I was watching the drummers and all those rock bands, and so when the chance to play drums came around, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Nice. No, and Ringo and Charlie, I mean, those are two generational talents, and I know Ringo still coming out with music. He came out with an album earlier this year.
Yeah, in his 80s and everything, still doing it. Doesn't need the money, but he loves it, so he still loves it. So I think that's really cool.
No, very.
I hope to still have that passion at age 80.
Yes. So we're at the end of your senior year of high school. At what point did you know that you wanted to continue music into college?
Well, I definitely knew before I was a senior. I had started to think around the time I was a freshman in high school that it might be something that I wanted to do. I was also really gifted in math. I was part of the math club and everything. And I enjoyed that, but I didn't have a real fiery passion for it. And, so kind of somewhere in my freshman year in high school, I started to think, maybe I would want to go for a music career. So definitely by the time I was a senior, I was singularly focused on a music career. So
nice. And you started talking about math. I would have. I'm the complete. I'm horrible at math.
It's not everybody's thing.
Oh yeah. So, what factors went into deciding what college to attend for your undergrad?
Well, I went to the University of Central Missouri for my undergrad, which is only about a 30-minute drive from where I grew up in Sedalia, Missouri. So part of it was just the familiarity. I've been on campus many times for various events, for music and for math club and for theater as well. We went to events on campus. And so I was pretty familiar with the campus, and I was also really familiar with some of the music professors that I would be working with. I was already taking lessons from Dr. Richard Smith during my senior year in high school, so I would commute over there to get my weekly piano lessons, and so I was already in with him, and then Dr. Michael Sikelski, who was the percussion instructor, had come to Sedalia to clinic our band several times, and so I was already familiar with him, and I liked him really well and everything. So that's kind of fed into it, and also the theater side, because I was interested in musical theater and writing musical theater and stuff like that, and so I was also had met some of the theater professors beforehand, and just thought it seemed like a good fit for me. Also financially, it was close to home, and it wasn't a really expensive university. I was also able to get a lot of good scholarships for it, and so that's mainly what fed into my decision.
Nice. And what was your what degree path did you study?
Well, I started as a double performance major in piano and percussion, but I did not stick with that for long. After the first year, I switched it to where I was a piano major and a percussion minor, and then by my junior year, or somewhere in there, I switched to a jazz commercial degree, which I don't know that I would recommend that career path for most people. I would say if you're going to go the jazz and commercial route, you really ought to just get out there and do as much playing as you can.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that a college degree is the right way to go for that. I'm not saying it's not, but it wasn't really the career path that I was really shooting for, necessarily. Yeah. So I'm not sure that it did me much good. And that's where I might this interview may go off the rails a little bit. It's like I don't necessarily have I didn't start with a clear goal in mind, So where I've ended up is not necessarily where I planned to end up when I started. Things just kind of things happen in life, and I think when I was younger, I just had this idea of I'm good enough. I just get out there, and people are just going to shower me with praise and money, and everything will be good. But didn't really have the clearest path on how to get there, and that's one thing that I really realized my senior year in college when I started to think about, well, what am I really going to do next? I didn't really have the clearest idea, and I actually went to the Career Center on campus and found out that they didn't really know how to advise musicians. They said, well, do you want to be a teacher? Because that's about the only route that they knew how to advise you on at that level.
So what were those next steps you took after receiving your bachelor's?
Well, now in my senior year, what I was really passionate about that time was composing musical theater. I've composed a few musicals, and I had been looking at the graduate musical theater writing program at NYU, and I actually got called into the final rounds to audition for that. And this is another place where it's looking back on it is well, maybe I could have gotten into that if I think where I messed it up was on the interview. And, you learn these things in life, because I went in there to the program, and they had basically three, they didn't call them majors, but there were three focuses that you could choose from, and everybody was supposed to have a major and a minor focus, basically. And the three focuses were composition, playwriting, and lyric writing. And so I put composition as my first and lyric writing as my second. And when I got to the interview, they asked me some questions and stuff, and then they asked, well, do you have any questions for us? And I mentioned that, I see that there's playwriting classes and there's lyric writing classes. Well, what about the music composition classes? And they said, well, we don't really like to direct, your personal voice as a composer, so we don't really do that. and I just kind of, I know it. It showed in my face. And I was like, really? Why? Then why don't you say? If you're going to say you want everybody to develop their own personal voice as a composer, so we don't have any classes, why don't you say the same thing about playwriting and lyric writing? And it's like, oh, why would we have a class on playwriting? We don't want to disturb your natural, and it bothered me, and I'm sure they could tell in the interview that I was kind of disgusted by that, because it's like, well, yeah, of course you want to develop your own voice as a writer and a composer and all that, but if you're going to school to learn about it, we should at least be able to discuss compositional techniques, what works and what doesn't work. But it's they just. Now, I could be wrong, because I don't know much else about the program other than the few days that I spent there doing that final round of auditions, but it seems like their emphasis was not really in talking about the theory behind musical theater composing, and obviously there's been a lot of work in that area. There's a lot of music theorists that have studied it, and musicologists and everything, so it just seemed really weird to me that it was like, no, we don't do that. So... yeah, I don't know that I would have been a good fit for that program, and obviously, that they didn't accept me, so I think it was probably because they could see that I was not going to be a good fit for them.
That would really be interesting to see if NYU still operates like that.
Yeah, I have not really checked into it too lately to see if the program is still even there. I assume it hasn't gone anywhere, but I don't know. Good question. I don't know.
So, you get into your master's. Where did you get your master's, and what path did you diverge down?
Okay, yeah, and this is another place where it's like I can't say that this was the best well thought out plan here, but what happened at first was, well, I didn't get accepted to NYU. Didn't really have much of a backup plan. I thought maybe I would take a year off, but when I got closer and closer to the point of I'm going to be done, I'm going to be out of here, I was like, well, not sure what to do next. So I just stayed where I was. I just stayed at UCM and got a master's degree in, it was theory and composition, but my emphasis was more on the composition side and jazz arranging as well. So I arranged a bunch of big band charts during that time. And so I completed that degree, and then I thought, well, okay, I should go on, and see if I can get my doctorate. And so at that time, I kind of felt like music theory was the way that I wanted to go rather than music composition, because I felt like I could teach music theory better than I could teach music composition for some reason. I thought that. I don't know why. Looking back on it. But I thought, well, I'm not sure if I can really tell a composer how to write, but I can explain theory. So I was kind of going more that route. So I applied for 4 different schools for my for the doctoral programs in music theory, and Florida State was one of them. And they looked at my record and said, well, you have a lot of composition and you have a little bit of theory here, but really to get in the doctoral program, you would need to have more theory, courses in your master's program. And they said, well, you do have a really strong application. We could bring you into our master's program, and you could bring some of your credits over and then complete another master's. And so that's what I ended up doing. I was able to, it was not transfer credits, but it was, I was able to cover certain course requirements from the degree that I already had. And so I was able to do it in just a year and a half to get a second master's. This one was a master's of music theory. And by the end of that master's, I started to realize that, I'm not sure if music theory is really for me. And I started to turn towards music composition. And then I actually did take some time off. So I took actually 3 years off. And again, not exactly sure where I was going next. I was working in a day program for adults with developmental disabilities. I had started as a music teacher there, and then eventually got into management, and eventually realized that that wasn't really my passion. I really needed to get back to music. And so then I applied for LSU, and again, you would think by this time I would have gone in for composition. But I was afraid that I wouldn't get in on composition because I didn't have a master. Well, I did have the master's from UCM, but my master's from Florida State was in theory, so I thought I would have a better shot at getting into a doctoral program in theory instead.
I want to backtrack for just a second. So, when Florida State offered you the opportunity to get that second master's, this one in theory, and what went through your head, and what factors led you to determine that, hey, getting the second master's, at least in the moment, deciding that was the right move?
Well, there's a couple things that factored into that decision. First thing was none of the other schools accepted me either into their PhD programs. But then Florida State, they also offered me the University Fellowship Award, which is a pretty prestigious award, and it was a full ride for that whole first year. Second year, well, it was just one more semester I had to do, but I was able to leave there without too much debt. But so that factored into it as well. This, they gave me a pretty good award there to get started. So, and let's say you said what factored into my decision to do it. That was mainly it. It was like, it seemed like, well, if none of the other schools were accepting me, it was probably for similar reasons. So if I had a more robust master, well, for the theory emphasis, had a more robust master's, and that would help me get into a PhD program.
Okay.
So.
How was your experience at Florida State? Were there any notable professors you had the opportunity to study under?
Oh yeah. I had a lot of very, very smart professors there. You can name a few. There was Dr. Evan Jones was one that I really liked. Dr. Sheftel, Nancy Rogers and Michael Buckler were both very smart professors as well. Dr. Clendenning, who has an undergraduate textbook that she's written. There were a lot of really good professors there. And it was very strenuous. It was a very tough school. I think they really they worked us hard for sure. I learned from that experience that theory was maybe not the best fit for me, but then somehow still going for that PhD program, I was like, well, but now I've got a really good degree in theory, so that would give me a good chance of getting into a theory PhD program. So that's where I was at that point. And the other thing, when I was getting ready, I really wanted to get back into a PhD program for music, is that I didn't necessarily have a great composition portfolio built up at that time. I'd had some, I'd written a lot of stuff, but I just didn't really have a good portfolio built up with good recordings and things like that. And I was thinking, I need to maybe get more of a variety. I'd written a lot of jazz stuff, and I'm like, that's not really what a lot of these programs want to see in your portfolio. Or they might not hurt to put one in there, but unless you're going to a program that's specifically to write jazz music, it's not what a lot of professors are comfortable teaching. And I did find that out actually when I applied for some of the schools. They're like, well, it seems like you're more of a jazz guy, and I don't really teach jazz. And some of the professors actually emailed me that back, and I don't know anything about jazz, so I wouldn't be a good teacher for you.
So the jazz composition background, was that almost a turnoff to a lot? So that was a turnoff to a lot of schools?
Potentially, yeah, or at least it was one of those things where like, well, that's not my emphasis. So it's like, the professors who had wrote me back, said, well, I just don't really know jazz, and it's like I wouldn't be able to really help you with that. So
what would a lot of those schools have been like? What would have been more desirable to some of those professors?
Oh, they would want to see more, contemporary styles of composition. A lot of that is music that I don't really care that much for myself. Stuff that's serial music, stuff non-tonal music, which in itself is not a bad word. It's for something to be non-tonal, but it's just not my main thrust as a composer. It's not really the main thing that I'm interested in. I do occasionally like to write some things that are non-tonal and some stuff that's a little out there, but a lot of academic composition programs. It's largely it's largely centered around the stuff that's non-tonal. That's where I was very fortunate with how I ended up getting into composition PhD program, was that I was in a theory PhD program at first, and then at LSU, and then I decided that I wanted composition to be my minor, because you actually had a minor in your doctoral program there. And so when I started taking lessons with Dinos Konstantinidis, who was the composition professor there, realized that we were very similar. It's like we wrote music that was it wasn't always 100% tonal, but it was much more accessible, I think, and that's kind of what I'm about as a composer. Is I want everybody to get enjoyment from it, not just, oh, you've really studied and you understand this, this esoteric composition technique that, oh, now you'll enjoy it. It's just not really what I was looking for. I wanted to write music that people, in general really want to hear. So, and Pinos's music, is beautiful. It's very listenable, very enjoyable. So I enjoyed studying with him.
So I imagine. So had you met Dinos prior to starting at LSU?
No, I hadn't. That was the other thing. I told you this interview was going to reveal that I had no plan for a lot of this stuff. But really, like I said, I was working at that day program for adults with developmental disabilities, and I was a manager of one of the locations, and I just knew that I really needed to move on. But I was just like, how do I move on? So, I picked a few schools to send applications to, and like I said, I did theory because I thought that was the best route for me, to have a chance of getting in. And sorry, I lost my train of thought just for a moment. So yeah, forgot where I was going with that.
Well, let me ask you. So, what led you to deciding to pursue your doctorate at LSU? What schools had you applied for, and what ultimately led you to make the decision that you made?
Let's see. So I decided to try out for LSU because while I was at Florida State and I wasn't sure if I was going to try to stay there or not, that one of the professors suggested they thought that LSU might be a good fit for me, and so it was just kind of in the back of my mind from then. And I'm trying to remember which schools I applied for when I applied for LSU. It's kind of hard to remember. Because I applied for grad school on multiple occasions, so I don't remember which one was which. I think I applied for the University of Kansas, and maybe might have been Washington University in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just trying to think. It seems like there was maybe one other. I really can't think of what it was right now. But yeah, there were various reasons. I think they were all based on recommendations for someone. Of course, Kansas and Washington and St. Louis would have been closer to home, so that was part of the reason for looking at those places. But so it was based on a recommendation. That's how I ended up locking in onto that one.
Yeah. So how was your time at LSU?
Oh, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah, I actually felt I was a better fit there than at FSU.
Nice.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I was any worse of a fit at FSU. I think maybe I just wasn't quite at the maturity level to be ready for it when I was there.
Yeah.
I think it's impossible, but if I had had the experience of being there, I would have been more ready to actually be there. But I think at the time I was, and it was a tricky time in my life anyway, because my first baby arrived in the fall when I arrived there. So it was
at Florida State.
It was hard, at Florida State. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I had my first kid, and that was it's just it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was. I think I was just had so many things going on, and I like I said, I just don't know that I was quite ready for it, like emotionally or maturity level. I was fairly mature, but I just hadn't seen enough of the world yet. I was just at home and 30 minutes down the road from home, all the way through my academic career at that point. So it was a whole new thing being in an entirely different place where nobody knows who you are.
Mm-hmm. So how was your time at LSU? Academically, but also, did you have to work any jobs on campus?
Fortunately, when I was at LSU, I had a pretty good assistantship, so I really didn't have to. I did actually do some work doing residential life, and that actually did help a bit because even though I had a really good assistantship, I was still raising a family. So it's like, so I still needed more money than just the assistantship provided. Now the assistantship covered tuition, plus it was a good, good stipend, to keep things afloat. But the working for residential life, the advantages with that was we got our family apartment. The rent was covered from that side job there, and they also gave me another stipend on top of that. And you could get extra hours of work here and there doing really menial tasks. So I would go to a residence hall where they're remodeling it and take a clipboard around and check and make sure every door had a door number on it, things like that. It was really boring, but you could get a lot of hours. So in the summer when I didn't have as much going on, I was still taking classes in the summer, but it was only maybe 2 that were available for me to take. So I ended up having a pretty good amount of free time. So I would just go over and collect those hours and get a little more cash. So
it sounds like a good way to use that extra time.
Yeah, and for me, I love wandering around big college campuses and seeing what all the buildings are like. It's always interesting to me. So it's actually a good fit of a job for me because I got to go in all these different buildings and see what they all look like. So.
Okay. Well, what was your favorite building on LSU's campus?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I did really enjoy. There's a couple of them that come to mind. I think it was the natural history, building or something or I don't know, paleontology or something. You go in there and there's a bunch of big dinosaur statues in there.
Oh yeah, geology building.
Yeah, okay, it's geology. So that one was pretty neat. I also I'm not sure what it was, maybe an architecture building or something like that, but there was a nice courtyard right outside one of the buildings where it was just kind of, it had like a garden wall sort of thing around it, and people in that academic program I'm sure knew about it because they go to that building.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would take my lunch and go sit over there and eat it because it's just a nice little atmosphere. So, yeah.
Nice.
There are a few interesting buildings on campus if you explored enough.
No, and with how big LSU's campus is, there is never a shortage of places to explore.
Yeah, and I'm sure I didn't hit all of them, but I hit a lot of them.
Nice.
Yeah, did a lot of wandering.
Did you ever go to the dairy store?
Yes.
Yes.
That actually popped in mind as well. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Favorite flavor?
Oh wow, I don't even remember what the flavors were. I think I only went there maybe 3 or 4 times actually, so I can't remember. It's a long time ago now.
I'll tell you. And hey, dairy store giving you some free advertising right here. You're welcome. Me and my friends, we'd always get Tiger Bite.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's right. That was one of them.
It's like a mix of French vanilla and I believe blueberries. Wait, best ice cream you'll ever have. You have to eat it.
That's fantastic.
You have to. If you're an LSU student, it's illegal not to.
Probably right.
So, and what opportunities did you have while you were in music, while you were studying at LSU?
Let's see. Well, the thing that I really liked about LSU, and we had this at Florida State as well, but there was a good camaraderie among all the music theory majors, and the thing that I think was even a little more. Well, yeah, there was. I'm trying to think. It's all so long ago. Some of it.
Yeah.
Florida State. I was involved in composition there a little bit. I didn't take lessons there, but I did go to the society, composer society meetings and stuff like that. And so there was a little bit of camaraderie between the music theory, musicology, and composition. But I think it was even more pronounced. I think when we were at LSU, it was a little bit smaller. Florida State's very big. LSU is big as well, but not as big. We still had quite a few graduate students in those 3 departments, but I felt like there was a little bit more camaraderie there with it's a more tight-knit group, and that could just be the year that I was there too. I don't know. It's different factors involved, I guess. I also felt that it was a better fit for me, or at least, like I said before, maybe I was just more ready to be there than when I got to Florida. You know, I'd had a few more years to get accustomed to being a father in addition to being a student. You know, and like I said, where I kind of felt that I stalled in the music career, and I was getting back to it. So there was a lot of it that it felt like, okay, this feels right. You know, it feels like where I need to be.
I can imagine just everything, the wealth of knowledge that studying under Dinos would bring you.
Oh, yeah.
That had to have been really cool.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, what was amazing was just how quickly my compositions started to feel more mature when he started working with me. You know, because I think I spent so many years. Because even when I was not in school, like that 3 years that I was out of school, I was still doing a lot of arranging work. And for most of my clients, I had to keep things kind of in the box, you know? And so that kind of started to bleed over into my composition. So I would start to compose things more square and more just like I was keeping everything very conservative, you know? When I started working with Dinos, he's like, oh no, you cannot make things just, fit squarely between the bar lines. You have to let the gesture flow, and he had all these visualizations he would do, he would like, okay, I want you to take this piece of paper and draw what the shape of your movement, the first I'm like, you want me to what now? So he did a little example. He's like, okay, and then we'll flourish up, and then we'll have these windows, and he had this whole visualization
like
process.
What you're feeling through the music.
Yeah. Okay. And he was like, you got to make sure those gestures come across when you're writing your melodic lines and stuff. And I was like, it's really, an interesting, beautiful way to describe it. So.
Okay.
And almost immediately start to see my compositions like, okay, yeah, I see, and things started to be less square and much more organic sounding.
Yeah. Nice. So you're getting towards the end of your time at LSU. How did you end up in Natchitoches? What?
That's a good question. Yeah. So when I left LSU, when I was finishing up, I applied for something like 36 different positions at different colleges and universities.
Oh, wow.
And it's just tough. It's really very high competition, to get very few spots at these universities. And it sure helps if you have a lot of experience already, like you already have years of teaching experience, which I'd had a couple of semesters of being an instructor of record, but everything else was teaching as a graduate assistant, so I didn't have that much.
Yeah.
So I got 2 offers at colleges, and they were both for adjunct work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was simply not going to work, because at that time I had 2 children, and then one was on the way. So I was like, so I had to just keep looking. I had to look at other avenues as well. So
for any young people watching this, what is adjunct work?
Okay, yeah, adjunct work is when you are you're not a full-time professor, but you are teaching a class and you're just getting paid per class that you're teaching, and you get paid at a much lower rate than a professor would get to teach that class. And so it doesn't come with any benefits like health insurance or anything else that you would get with a full-time position. And so it's not glamorous. Now what I'm doing now, I'm teaching adjunct at NSU, but it's as a side job. Now if that was your primary source of income, you'd kind of be in trouble, I think, because it just doesn't do enough. And especially when you have, when you're married and have 2 kids and a third one about to arrive, it was just not going to work.
So typically, adjunct, if it's your side job, then that's okay. Typically. Yeah.
Well, there's you could question the whole system a little bit and say, there's probably too many things that used to be full-time professorships being turned into adjunct positions, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand why NSU would have composition as an adjunct because it's not a degree program. They don't have a degree program for music composition.
Yeah.
So, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have a full-time composer on faculty. So I can understand that in that case, but sometimes you start getting what should be more important sort of classes that are being farmed out to adjuncts just so you can save from having to pay another full-time professor.
Yeah.
And, I'm just saying that in general. I'm not saying here necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just something that's happening more and more as colleges are not getting the sort of funding that they used to get, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. So working with the Natchitoches Parish School District is your main source of income.
Right.
How did you land on the NPSD?
Well, what I did was, as I was searching for jobs, so I was already in Louisiana. I figured, well, I'll look into that. I think somebody might have mentioned to me the existence of the talent program before that, but I didn't really know what they were talking about, because that's the funny thing, is like even people who live in Louisiana don't know it exists half the time. It seems like I have to explain it. And the beauty of it is you don't have to have an education degree and education certification that you would get through a degree in order to get the position. You do have to apply for an ancillary certificate, but if you have an advanced degree like a master's or a doctorate, then you're basically a shoe-in to get the ancillary talent certificate. And so as I started to realize that I'm only getting adjunct offers and that's not going to cut it, I started to look at the whatever it was, Teach Louisiana. That's the website, right?
Yeah.
the website with all the Louisiana teaching jobs on. And I started to look at what's available there, and maybe I would look at getting alternative certification, because I wasn't aware of the ancillary route at that point. And then I saw the one. It was listed. The way it was listed was NSU Middle Lab, and they wanted someone for talent, piano, and voice, and it said something like drama experience preferred or theater experience preferred.
Yeah.
I was like, that actually sounds like a good fit, because I'm a piano teacher. I taught piano. I didn't mention that, but I've taught private piano lessons since I graduated from high school. Actually, I started with percussion, and then I added piano, and then I've done both.
Very cool. Very cool.
So I already had a lot of experience teaching piano lessons, and I also was a singer, and had not really taught vocal lessons, but done a lot of vocal coaching, right? Because I had directed musicals and things like that where I had to coach the vocalists, and I was also during my first master's for a couple of years, I was the choral accompanist at the high school in Warrensburg, Missouri. And so I had a lot of experience coaching vocalists, not necessarily teaching them, but it's close enough, right? So, but then the theater experience as well. So I had a great love for theater, and did a lot, especially in my undergrad, mostly as a musician, but every once in a while, actually did a little acting. And did acting all through high school. But
any cool roles you've played acting?
My favorite role that I've ever played, and I got to play it twice, which is kind of
cool, man,
was in the play You Can't Take It With You. It's an old play, and there was a part in there, and the character's name is Ed Carmichael. And he's kind of this quirky guy, and he plays the xylophone. That's one of his quirky things that he does. And when that role came up, when I was in high school, I was looking at the options, and I was like, I was like, at first I was like, I want to be, the lead man in the play and whatever, and I was like, and the more I read it, I was like, you know what? I think that xylophone one really fits me really well. And so I ended up trying out for that part and getting that part, and playing the xylophone for it. And at the time, there were several pieces listed in there. Some of them more vaguely than others. One that says he plays something by Beethoven, so I was like, gotta pick something by Beethoven. One part it says he plays Scheherazade, which at the time I didn't know what that was, So I created my own cues for that, played them on the xylophone, and we used that. And then when I was in college, it's actually funny because in college I didn't really do a lot of acting. I did a couple of black box shows, which were just written by other students. They were short things, but nothing, nothing really on stage, on the main stage. Because I was mostly a musician. I played in the pit, or I was directing the music, or whatever, or composing.
Yeah,
did a lot of that. But that was. I'm trying to think what year that was exactly. I don't remember now, but it was later in my time there, and then it was kind of when I was getting close to being on my way out, and it was like, oh, fun! They're doing You Can't Take It With You, and at first the director said, and it was during a summer repertory theater, so we had 3 shows that were going on. They were doing a musical, they were doing that play, and then they had a children's play going on, and I was directing the music for the musical. Yeah. And the director for You Can't Take It With You said, hey, when we get somebody to play this part of Ed, could you help them learn how to play the xylophone? I was like, oh, sure, yeah. And then a few minutes later, I was like, what if I just tried out for it? She's like, oh, well, you could do that, And so I tried out for it, and I got the part.
Hey, there you go.
And this time I got to do a lot better arrangements because I knew a lot more about the music cues they were asking for, and so I rearranged all the cues, and then I actually put those all into sheet music, and then I put those up on my website, and actually give away the sheet music, but I sell the MP3s. So if somebody wants to can the music and play it, while somebody's faking it, then they can pay for it. But I'm like, hey, if they want to do the work and actually learn how to play, I'm gonna let you have it free. So they can have the sheet music, but sell the MP3s.
Nice.
So,
and what is that website?
SamuelStokesMusic.com.
SamuelStokesMusic.com. Okay. What all do you have on there?
I have the hodgepodge of things. So you have links to my to all of my music catalog, which is through Hal Leonard's Arrange Me program. They have and the music that I post is all on Sheet Music Plus and on Sheet Music Direct, so you can actually get it from either one of those sites. Have some stuff on JW Pepper as well, but a lot less. They don't bring any sales for me. I get a lot more from Hal Leonard. So that's my main focus. The other things on my website, I've got a lot of just resources for teachers on there because, I tend to be generous with that stuff. I come up with a good, teaching exercise, or here's a piano technique sheet or a percussion technique sheet, and I just stick it on there. My rhythm sheets, those are the things that get tons and tons of views. It's actually kind of funny because I've had 4 or 5 people from my past, it's out of the woodwork. It's like, hey, I was looking for rhythm sheets for my kids and found yours. So
nice,
they're pretty prominent in Google search apparently. Several times people contacted me on that. Then I have the musicals and the children's musicals that I've written on there. Got a bunch of little skits that I've written for the middle school drama club that I work with, and those are available for free if anybody wants to look at those. Trying to think if I have anything else on there. Yeah, it's just a lot of random stuff. But all dealing with either music or playwriting. So.
And that's SamuelStokes.com.
SamuelStokesMusic.com.
SamuelStokesMusic.
Yeah, somebody had the other one already. So.
Oh man. And the evil Sam Stokes.
I guess so. Yeah, the one with the pointy beard and all that.
Man. All right. So you find the job in Natchitoches. You interview for it. Obviously, it was appealing enough to take it.
Mm-hmm.
What was appealing about that position? Because, I know up till that point, you'd never been a talent instructor.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I think it was just the fact that it was a really good fit. Now, I was mainly searching for a music composition professorship.
Yeah.
But when I was looked at that job listing, it kind of jumped out to me right away. It's like that, these are actually things that I have experience with and that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this might be okay. This might be a good job for me. And the other thing, is from a practical standpoint, when I was looking at the, other 36 jobs that I either didn't get offered or didn't take, not very many of them paid as much as being a public school teacher. It's really kind of a sad state. That's, I think, when I was growing up, being a college professor was a decent salary, and now it's like, it's very hard to find any positions like that. That's had that, as I started looking and realizing that, some of these college teaching jobs were like starting at $36,000, something like,
Wow.
I could start now I think with just a bachelor's starting out is not that high, or not as high as what I was getting starting out with a PhD. That definitely helps, right?
Yeah, of course.
Starts you on a different place on the salary schedule. But yeah, still, I mean, with a lot of, the state of the college and university systems, at least here in America, it's like you could start at that and then just stay at that. You may never go up, unless you're promoted to a different position. But at least, in the public school salary schedule, it's like based on your years of experience as a teacher and what degree you have, you start at a different place on that schedule. So starting on the PhD rung is higher than the master's, higher than the bachelor's. Now it was just starting at zero, but, it's after 10 years, it's like now I'm PhD with 10 years, and it's a lot better than being a professor who starts at 36,000 and for 10 years is maybe still 36,000.
Yeah.
It's like, now they don't all make that little, but it's not as good as a lot of people might think. The state of it at this point. So,
did you know anybody in the music world in Natchitoches at the point where when you took the position?
Let's see. I don't think that I had known anybody that was here, but Dinos had mentioned a few people that I should get in contact with when I got up here, and then Adam Hudlow, who was in the PhD program with me at LSU, he had gone to school here, so he already had a connection. So I already knew Adam and Elisa Hudlow, and now they're all working here too.
Yeah, okay.
So we all ended up in this direction. I had very little connection. I remember having driven through Natchitoches once and said, "How do you pronounce that?" And also I remember going through town, and it seemed like it was late at night, and we drove down, I guess, University Parkway, because we drove by the Demon Bookstore. It's not there anymore, but it used to have a big sign that said the Demon Bookstore, and I'm like, what is this? Some sort of like satanic bookstore? And knew nothing about Natchitoches at that point. I was like, is this some sort of like Satan worshiper cult or something?
The Demon Bookstore.
It's like they sell the Necromonicon or something. Yeah.
Oh man.
It was confusing late at night just to see a big sign that said the Demon Bookstore. It seems a little evil.
Man. Yeah, that would be a memory that sticks with you.
Yeah. So when I saw that job listing, I was like, oh, it's in Natchitoches, Louisiana. That's where that demon store is. So, but I figured out pretty quick what was going on.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Very cool. Right, so I know you said like a semester after you started here, you were able to become a semester after you started working with the Natchitoches School District, you were able to get the adjunct position at Northwestern, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something that was actually in my interview that was mentioned that was a possibility because Dr. Christine Carell was actually in my interview. She was previously the horn professor and also previously had my job as the Trinity Episcopal organist and choir master. yeah, she was part of my interview because she had 2 daughters that were in the talent program at that time, and the principals that were at the interview, they didn't really know what questions to ask me necessarily, so they brought her in.
Yeah.
Since she was a musician, and she didn't take it easy on me. I'll say that. She ran me through the ringer, asked me all kinds of different questions, but yeah, it was good. She asked all the right, very good questions, and I answered them all. So I think I did all right. Obviously, I got the job, so I guess I did.
Yeah.
Well. But she mentioned that, it's a possibility, because she saw that I had a composition degree. It's like, yeah, the person that was doing the composition classes is probably going to be getting ready to retire. So yeah, I ended up getting it the next semester. So that worked out well. And she'd also mentioned at the time that, hey, you could sub for me as an organist. And at the time, I was like, I don't know how to play organ. She was like, oh, well, you're a pianist, so you can figure it out. And she was right. It's like if you're a pianist, you can figure it out. It takes a little effort, but it's not like it's not a one-to-one skill transfer. But you just learn how to get the right touch and everything. And you just kind of little by little figure out more about what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. And how long have you been the full-time because you started as a sub, but then she retired and you were able to become the full-time organist?
Yeah. She actually, I don't think she fully retired. She moved. Well, she may have retired from the university. I'm not sure, but she did move and she was still teaching when she moved to Texas. But that was. I'm trying to think how long ago that was now. Maybe. Was it 2021 or 2022? I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's either 2 or 3 years. I don't know. I think it's maybe coming around 3 years. I think this summer maybe it's 3 years.
Okay.
That seems right.
Okay, and so you've been at Trinity Episcopal now for 3 years as the organist and the choir director.
Right.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, and one of the things I really enjoy about that is it gives me a chance to do some writing. And even, it's funny, I like to compose original settings and stuff, which I'll do for the Psalms a lot. Or I had been doing for the Psalms. Now I got a composition student that likes to do it. So,
hey, there you go.
So now he's doing a lot
nice.
of it. But and I can compose my own arrangements of things, and so I've been doing a lot of that. And even, it's funny, like, you wouldn't think it, but even just like transcribing music sometimes is so enjoyable for me, because sometimes I'll have these parts that is just written as a unison choir thing, but then I'll have 4 parts in the accompaniment, like consistently 2 parts in the left and 2, and I was like, why isn't this just a 4-part choir? And so I'll just transcribe it out and just, okay, now it's a 4-part choir piece. I was like, I enjoy just doing that. I just like putting notes on the pages. It's fun for me.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, sounds like you've built a pretty solid portfolio of positions for yourself then.
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah.
Nice. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a young person who maybe is studying music in college and, like yourself, it wasn't sure of it, or in the moment isn't sure what direction they want to go in?
Yeah.
Or what direction they can go in.
Right. So yeah, it all depends on what the individual wants to do. But first of all, I would say, if you're gonna pursue music, make sure it's what you really, really want to do.
Yeah.
I've definitely known a lot of people, I'm sure you have as well, that they really loved band in high school, and then when it gets to go into college, and then they realize, oh, this is a whole lot of work, and I don't really know as much as I thought I did, and then they give up and go do something else. It's like, well, it's good to maybe have a little bit of awareness beforehand that just because you really like band or you really like choir, you got to know that you got to be willing to work really hard, to learn the things that you don't know that you don't know. A lot of things that just there's so much that I don't know, and that every one of us doesn't know. And we're still learning all the time, right?
Yeah, so students of life.
So that's an important thing. You got to just be willing to know that you're going to have to always be working. You're always going to be learning new things. if nothing else, you're going to be learning new literature. Learn new pieces and learn how to conduct them or whatever you're doing with them, or learning how to play them. All that. So that's an important thing to realize, is that it is a lot of work, and you want to be aware that just because it's fun doesn't mean every bit of it's always going to be fun. You're going to have to work hard at it. The other thing would be whatever direction that a music student wants to go. I would say it's very important to explore that career path. As I mentioned earlier, it's not something that I did enough, because at first I was, I think, had the idea that, I could be a musical theater composer, and if I just go out there will be jobs for them. Thinking back on it, it's like, that's ridiculous. I didn't know what I'm thinking, but it's one of those things that, you got to have the right connections for it, and you've got to work constantly at it. It's not like, I wrote a musical, so here you go, somebody play it. No, musicals go through sometimes years of workshopping, and doesn't mean that there's an income coming while all that's happening, so you have to be a bit realistic in that. I know it's shoot for your dreams, but also be realistic at the same time. I think be aware that I make a good amount of money composing and arranging. Wouldn't be probably enough to get by on, but it's a good supplement to what I have. But I would say, if you're going to be composing, arranging, put your heart into it, but realize that most musicians also teach at some point. You look at the greats like Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. It's like, they had to take students from time to time. It's like, that's just the reality of life. You can be a great composer and still you still have to teach. So I think it's important, and it's also important to at least to me, it's important pass on what you're doing. It's like I like having students. I particularly like students that I can see are gonna continue with it. I have some composition students, they take it, but they didn't put a lot of effort into it. Maybe they thought they were interested in doing it and then realized, it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But I have some students here and there, they're just like particularly into it, and you can see, they're going to keep doing this, and they're going to produce some good stuff. So it's always nice to see that. And it doesn't mean that they're going to go out and do exactly like me. Every student I've worked with has their own voice, but I like being able to have some hand into shaping that. So it feels good for me. It feels very fulfilling. So
no, and as a music educator myself, it is very rewarding getting to see your students have success at what you're working at with them in music, and also in life in general. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite parts of teaching. So I know you talked so follow up to what you just talked about. So how would you get through some of the harder times? So I know you talked about there were times that you just weren't sure what direction to go, or like the times where you worked with the adults with disabilities for 3 years. How did you push through those times and still keep that passion that music is what you want to do with your life?
Very good question. Well, let's see. I would start with like when I was at Florida State, and it was a very hard program, and I was getting accustomed to being a father for the first time. That was it was very tough. It was a lot of work. And sometimes not enough sleep. But at the end of the day, I was just like, I just really love music, and I think many times I would have to rediscover it a little bit, because for me anyway, music theory, like, it could be really fascinating, and it could also be really terribly dull. And it could alternate from day to day,
Yeah.
and depending on what you're studying, because some of the stuff that I learned in there, I'm just like, wow, it's absolutely fascinating. Like, you might not think of it like 16th century counterpoint class. I mean, that sounds like the worst thing in the world to some people probably, but and I wasn't really sure coming into it, like, what is this, And then I started studying, I was like, oh wow, you start to understand, where some of these concepts, come from, that that were in the background of all of our tonal music and everything, and historically led into Bach and beyond. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it was always coming back to the music.
Yeah.
Because you're really in the weeds of anything, really. You can get in the weeds of the theory, or even just the practicing of the technique or whatever, of performing. But when you get back to it, sometimes you just have to slow down and just, listen to music again, and just to realize just how much you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Or maybe find out you don't enjoy it and then say, oh, no, I should
move on.
go on to something else.
Yeah, there you go.
There's always that as well.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Do you have any closing remarks for our listeners today?
Oh, good question. I should have thought of something before I came here. I would say just to, follow what you do with passion, find what you want to do, whether it's music or something else. Have a passion for it, and like we were just saying, it's like you need to sometimes take a break, step back, smell the roses, listen to the music, whatever you have to do, keep yourself going. That would be my advice, for what it's worth.
Yeah. And don't forget to visit Sam Stokes Music.
Yeah, SamuelStokesMusic.com.
Oh man, I'm 0 for 2 on that one. I'm 0 for 2.
We're just going to type it on the screen. So.
We will have SamuelStokesMusic.com linked in the description of this episode. Check it out, especially if you are a music educator. Well, Dr. Stokes, thank you so much for joining us in the practice room today.
Thanks for the chat.
All our listeners, all our viewers on YouTube and Spotify, thank you for tuning into episode 2 of the Practice Room Podcast. And as always, keep practicing. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of the Practice Room Podcast, where we learned about composer and music educator Samuel Stokes, who taught us to follow what you do with passion. Please join us next week on Wednesday, March 26th, for episode 3 of the Practice Room Podcast on YouTube and on Spotify. Thank you. And as always, keep practicing.